Hi, welcome to the 14-day weather forecast. I was up at the crack of dawn to go searching for snow, and I was quite successful. There we go. But I'm not really sure whether it counts or not. Now, is there any natural snow on the way as we head through the next 2 weeks in the approach to Christmas? Let's see. Here's the picture at 18 GMT, Tuesday the 10th. There's an area of high pressure centered across the north, which is bringing much quieter conditions than we were experiencing a few days ago. Mainly dry, although an easterly breeze in the south is bringing some drizzly rain in places. As I run the sequence, not a great deal changes in the short term, so it's mostly dry and settled with high pressure staying over the UK. But then into the weekend, there are indications of a change beginning to take place. Pressure starts to fall and disturbances begin moving in from the west or the northwest over some patchy outbreaks of rain. Running this through to conclusion, what we see is that an Atlantic flow returns. It's a brisk one. The isobars are closely packed together there, so it's quite windy for a time. But then there's some indications of high pressure once more having influence at least in southern and central counties. So quite a mix of weather through the first week, but at least at the time of filming this, it doesn't appear that we're going to be experiencing another very stormy spell, at least not through this period. Here's the jet stream and upper air temperature sequence. The UK just here, the mottled shaded area indicates the jet stream, so the main arm of it is to the north. The blues and purples are where the very cold air is. Now, as I run this, what we see is not much changes in the short term, as I've mentioned, but then later on the jet stream begins to sink southwards and head towards the UK, so it's a more changeable setup which is developing. Let's have a look at some of the surface conditions which can be expected. I'm using charts from the UKV model. These are for Wednesday, so precipitation on this one, it's really dry across Northern Ireland and the whole of Britain, maybe just a few showers there in the southwest. Temperatures, well, a little on the low side, single figures everywhere, but especially in Scotland where it is looking distinctly cold. Forwards to Friday and very little has changed. Cloud could bring a few patchy outbreaks of rain or drizzle, and temperatures haven't moved a great deal at all. And into the weekend, it's more of the same really to begin with, at least according to this. But if you look up to the far northwest there, indications of things starting to change with some outbreaks of rain approaching. If anything, at this point, temperatures are maybe a little bit higher than they were in the previous 2 or 3 days. It's just worth drawing attention to the overnight lows as well, because there will be some very cold nights in the north early on. This is showing forecast minimums on Thursday morning, and my chart on the right is Saturday. You can see minus double figures there in Scotland in the Glen, so down to -10 or even a bit lower perhaps in 1 or 2 locations for the first 2 or 3 nights. But cloudy conditions in southern and central counties are holding temperatures up in those areas. So I think the frost risk mostly is going to be in northern Britain, Northern Ireland, perhaps also for a time there in the west, but central, southern and eastern counties keeping those higher temperatures due to cloud cover. Moving forwards a little bit, using the charts from the GFS model now, because the UKV doesn't reach this far. Sunday you can see patchy outbreaks of rain there into the north and to the west. An Atlantic flow moving across the UK, milder air aloft really, and more mixing with the stronger winds. So temperatures down at the surface are a little bit higher, back into double figures. And into the first part of next week, so Tuesday, there's a weakening area of rain there and cooler air behind it once more, but in the south it's relatively mild. So fairly mixed through the first week. There is that possibility of it being quite windy for a time through the weekend into the early part of next week with the isobars packing closer together, but it's not looking anything like the conditions we experienced a few days ago. In terms of temperatures, according to the Mogreps G Ensemble plot, this reinforces the message really. Initially, it's for London. All the individual runs there are clustered closely together, as you would expect for the first few days, so good agreement on maximums being a little bit on the low side. Then they actually dip, so on the 13th, that may turn out to be the coldest day of the week in southern and central counties. But beyond that, the trend is for it to be turning milder. With that said, the runs are starting to diverge, so there is some uncertainty, but the majority of runs there are trending upwards, and quite a few show temperatures returning into daytime temperatures into double figures. Rainfall, the aggregates for days 0 to 5 from the ECM and GFS models. As you'd expect, with high pressure dominating, the totals are very low, almost universally. The exception is the northwest, so Western Scotland really, where 12 to 20 millimetres of rain has been projected according to these two models. But I think most of that is coming later on. Now, moving forwards to the 10-day charts, once more, the wettest conditions there are in the northwest, but there is a big discrepancy here with the ECM model on the left showing significant amounts of rain in southern and central counties, up to about 40 millimetres, and bear in mind that's falling through the day 5 to day 10 part of the forecast period. So something to look out for: uncertainty about the rain distribution between days 5 and days 10, apart from it does look as though there will be significant amounts in the far northwest, but elsewhere quite a lot of uncertainty. Now, in more general terms, how do the deterministic models compare with each other as we head towards the end of the first week? Here is the GFS model on Tuesday the 17th. High pressure is now centred to the south, a westerly flow moving across all regions, but high pressure probably having more influence in southern and central counties. So it's quite mixed. It's milder, a greater risk of rain in the north, possibly the west too. The Canadian model, very similar, consistent. The German icon, the ECM model, the ECM artificial intelligence model. I showed this for the first time last week. I will probably be using it in most updates here onwards, but on this occasion it's really showing something very similar. And finally, the UK Met Office global model, also a very similar pattern. Of course, as ever, the details do vary, but it's pointless really focusing on those at this range. The message here is that high pressure will sink southwards. There will be an Atlantic influence coming into play, particularly in the north. Temperatures trending upwards towards the end of the first week, probably becoming quite mild, especially in the south. The greatest risk of rain in the north and in the west. Now, how do things develop as we head through the second week? Of course, just the general trends and the probabilities at this range. And here's the 16-day GEFS plot for London. Upper air temperatures across the top, fluctuating around the average. There is something of a signal for them to dip later on. So early on, probably a little bit above, then later, maybe a little bit below. So the trend is downwards, if anything. In terms of precipitation, spikes continue to appear through this second week. Not much chance of snow here. The maximum the snow reaches is 4, just at the very end, and it can go up to 33. So what that means is that 4 runs out of the 33 are forecasting at least a flake of snow to fall on that particular day. It doesn't refer to accumulations. The 2-meter temperature data tables, these are actually quite interesting. If you're a cold weather fan, maybe some hope is being held out here, because the trend there is downwards, and by the end of the second week, about 40% of the runs are going for daytime maximums of between 1 and 5. So distinctly on the cold side. The overnight lows also showing a similar downwards trend towards the end there. Some blue starting to appear. Those are sub-zero runs. Nighttime lows, of course, being sub-zero, not during the days. Up to Manchester, the trends here are more or less a carbon copy, although if anything, the signal there for upper air temperatures to be a little bit below the average is stronger than it was on the London plot. And what that would tend to suggest is that the colder conditions, if they do come, will be moving down from the northwest. So polar maritime incursions rather than an easterly continental type setup. The number of precipitation spikes is similar, the snow row not really different either. The 2 metre temperature data tables are showing slightly lower values both through the days and through the nights than the London ones were, and quite a lot actually going sub-zero later on, so the chance of air frosts certainly increasing as we head through the second week. And if you look at the very end there, it does cover the Christmas Day, but I'll not really discuss that because it is so far off at this time. Up to Glasgow, very similar to Manchester, slightly below average on the whole through the second week, and it's reinforcing that message about the colder air coming down from the west for north rather than the east. Precipitation risk, well, it's ongoing, and here the snow row values are a little bit higher, so it wouldn't be at all surprising if snow fell in this part of the UK at least on 1 or 2 days through the second week. And as I say, just to reinforce that message, it doesn't necessarily mean the snow is going to be settling. It could just be a few flakes mixed into a shower or outbreak of rain. Here are the 2 metre temperature data tables for Glasgow. Lots of blue now appearing in the overnight lows, and the daytime maximums are a little bit lower than the Manchester ones. So all very consistent. The ECM Ensemble rain probability forecasts, well, they are suggesting an Atlantic-based pattern because the highest chance of 5 millimetres or more of rainfall on the first 3 days of the second week is in the west. That's shown by the orange shading. Moving forwards to the next 3 days, the general distribution is similar. The ensemble spread is probably greater at this range, hence the percentage chances tend to trend back towards the average. But the general distribution here suggests an ongoing likelihood of an Atlantic flow. I think it's worth just having a quick look at the GEFS snow depth forecasts for week 2. Each stamp on this sequence shows the output from one of the runs in the ensemble, and the message is clear. Accumulating snow is only really likely over high ground in the north. The risk in the southern half of the UK is low. Of course, it's impossible to be certain at this range. Things could change, but that's how they stand at the time of recording. The mean surface level pressure data table for York, quite interesting. It's difficult to draw too many conclusions because there's a lot of green there showing up, a fair amount of blue. Those are runs going for low pressure to be dominant, but likewise a lot of yellow and a fair amount of orange, which are high pressure dominated scenarios. So there isn't a strong signal for either low pressure or high pressure to be controlling the weather throughout this period. If anything, the trend later on is upward, so high pressure may be more influential as we approach Christmas. The GEFS snapshot pressure chart for Friday the 20th would suggest that high pressure will be centred to the south, the southwest, as is typical. Low pressure to the north, perhaps heading into Scandinavia. If that's the case, it would allow colder air from the north, the northwest, to be pushing southwards. The same message really from the ECM ensemble. Consistent, I think, there with the GEFS. So, to summarise, week 1, chilly and quiet to begin with, frost mostly in the north. Generally dry in southern and central areas, although there could be some drizzly outbreaks at times. Later on, it turns milder and more changeable, especially in the north. Week 2, changeable, so wet and windy periods are probable. Quite mild early on, but the chance of cold conditions increases, particularly in the north. Accumulating snow, though, is only likely over high ground in the northern half of the country. So, there we have it. Fairly nondescript early on. It then turns more changeable, but I suspect that if I want to see more snow, another visit to the indoor ski slope will be required. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. As ever, then if you did, please consider hitting the like button below and subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. In that way, you'll not miss any of my future updates. Also, stay up to date with the day-to-day developments by checking out the TheWeatherOutlook.com website. Thanks very much now. Bye.